Okay, so we are moving into MAiD now, which is different from most, because somebody told me the other day that people are going to the doctor and saying, we want to fill out our most and MAiD forms. So they are totally different things, right? So that's a really important thing to know. And we're so lucky to have Dr. Terry Miller here, who actually is kind of almost specializing in MAiD, right? As well as...
It's my retirement project.
Retirement project, right? That's great. So we are really lucky to have that in our community. So I talked about what you can do there. Was there any other questions about Elder Connect before we get started? Okay, perfect. Okay, so Dr. Terry Miller is going to talk to us about MAiD.
All right. Pardon the picture of my granddaughters and their dog. I am not as good at public speaking as Dr. Routley is. So bear with me. I'll probably squat there and read off my own slides, but I do have a brief video to show you at the end, which I think is probably says things better than I can. So I'm just going to here. Okay, so this is a quote from Woody Allen. I'm not afraid to die, I just don't want to be there when it happens. You only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough.
Can you hear that?
No, I can't hear her.
Yeah, because she can't see, so she can't read it.
Okay, so this is about medical assistance in dying, or MAiD, which is Canada's version of assisted dying. So, the history of assisted dying. In 399 BC, Socrates was charged with impiety, which is irreverence towards the state gods. He drank hemlock, and the question was it execution or suicide? In 1972, suicide was decriminalized in Canada. It had previously been a crime. In 1993, Sue Rodriguez, who I'm sure you've all heard of, was diagnosed with ALS, and she had a life expectancy of 3 to 5 years. She asked the Canadian Parliament, quote, if I cannot give consent to my own death, whose body is this? Who owns my life? She took her request to the Supreme Court of Canada and lost 5-4. She went on to have an assisted death 5 months later in Victoria with an unnamed doctor, and nobody pursued it. There were no charges laid. Quebec took the lead and filed a discussion paper in 2009. If euthanasia is to be permitted, it should be in a medical context and as a medical act. And it took quite a while to get through the courts, and in December 2015, Quebec enacted a law allowing MAiD, or medical assistance in dying, as a medical act and as an end-of-life alternative. For the rest of Canada, Bill C-14 came into force June 17, 2016, and this allowed assisted death to be performed by a physician or nurse practitioner. The requirements were that the applicant was a capable adult who was suffering intolerably, and they had a grievous and irremediable medical condition. C-14 required that the requestor be in an advanced state of decline and with a reasonably foreseeable natural death. Pardon the small print, in March 2017, court challenges about the unconstitutionality of requiring end-of-life state and with a reasonably foreseeable natural death led to Bill C-7. Bill C-7 dealt with this by creating 2 tracks with different safeguards. Track 1 applied to those with a reasonably foreseeable natural death, for instance, ALS or metastatic pancreatic cancer. Track 2 were those whose natural death is not reasonably foreseeable, for instance, early Parkinson's disease or mild to moderate COPD. Both tracks require a capable adult suffering intolerably and with a grievous and irremediable medical condition. So the criteria are that you be 18 years of age, capable of making healthcare decisions, eligible for health services funded by a federal government or a province or territory. The requester must make a voluntary request for MAiD that is not due to external pressure, and they must give informed consent after having been informed of options for relief of suffering, including palliative care. A requester must have a grievous and irremediable medical condition, which is defined as a serious and incurable illness, disease, or disability, being in an advanced state of irreversible decline in capability, experiencing enduring physical or psychological suffering that is intolerable to that individual, and which cannot be relieved under conditions that they consider acceptable. That is relevant where someone is told they have a terminal cancer, but that their life can be extended for X amount of time, and they refuse treatment. So it's patient-centered care, basically.
Okay, so you can, even though you could be treated for the cancer and your life could be extended for a year or so, you still have the choice to say, no, I don't want that, and so you can still have MAiD.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there's all the different nuances and things that go into that, but that's right.
Yeah.
But you can't be forced to take
Treatment?
Yeah.
No, that's the point.
No.
Differences between tracks 1 and 2. So track 1, you have to have a reasonably foreseeable natural death, and there's no waiting period required. A waiver of final consent is available if the clinician deems the requester is at risk of losing capacity. This came about from the Carter case, where a lady in Nova Scotia had metastatic breast cancer, which had gone to her brain, and she knew she was likely going to lose capacity real soon, but she wanted to make one more Christmas. Unfortunately, she decided to have MAiD so that she didn't lose capacity and thereby have to suffer. The requester may elect to extend the waiver date, and this must be on a new form and with a new date for provision. I have clients who are probably on their 5th or 6th extension, so and we do the waivers generally 3 months or 6 months or even shorter, but 6 months would be the maximum. If capacity is retained, a final opportunity to suspend provision must be offered just prior to MAiD. So what next? If a person is ready to apply, this can be with the assistance of home and community care nurses, your primary care physician, or through nursing if you are admitted to the hospital. If you are comfortable using a computer, you can simply Google MAiD, and you'll get a list of forms that are available from the province of BC. And then the relevant document is what's called a 1632 or application for MAiD. They're all autofill, and I've got a list of references that I'm going to email to you, and then you can send them out to print or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
What is a witness? So an independent witness can be any person at least 18 years of age and who understands the nature of the request, unless they are a beneficiary under the will of the person making the request. For example, family members or in-laws.
That's interesting.
There are situations where the requester has said, "This is my niece, and she is not a beneficiary." The provider can then write a note on the form saying the witness is not a beneficiary, and they will qualify. And the other people that can't be a witness are owners or operators of the healthcare facility at which the requester is being treated or where the requester resides.
But you can have, like, when someone is having MAiD, you have to have this independent witness, but you can also have family members present, right?
Oh.
But they just are not.
To do the
This
form?
is for the paperwork. Too.
Oh, that's for the paperwork.
It's for the paperwork only.
Yeah. Paperwork. Okay.
All right, so this is just a little TED Talk from Dr. Stephanie Green, and she's sort of the originator of MAiD in BC. Sorry, bear with me.
Yep.
We're not connected.
Oops, am I not connected? Should be. Sorry.
Turn your best idea.
Turn ads. Is that too loud or not loud?
You think I will thanks to today?
What if you could decide at the end of your life exactly when and where your death would happen? Maybe, instead of dying alone in the middle of the night in a hospital bed, you could be at home at a time of your own choosing. You could decide who would be with you, holding your hand or even embracing you as you left this life. And what if a doctor could help ensure that your death was comfortable, peaceful, even dignified? You might never look at dying the same way again. 100 years ago, most people in North America died at home. Modern medicine has saved and extended countless lives, but it also took the majority of deaths out of our homes and into our hospitals, so we've become removed and unfamiliar with death and dying. Our current medical model likes to frame death as an enemy rather than a natural stage in life. So some of you may have memories of loved ones who are dying that are less than ideal, and maybe in an acute care hospital, perhaps attached to machines that were monitoring irreversible decline, or receiving treatments that could no longer stop their illness. Some might even have been begging for your help to end their suffering. Palliative care is an approach that optimizes quality of life over quantity of life. But every clinician knows there are times when no approach will adequately relieve a person's suffering. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about assisted dying, the legalized, compassionate end-of-life care provided by clinicians who safely and effectively end a person's life in specifically safeguarded circumstances, which include the explicit request of a competent adult. Assisted dying. Now, right about now, there's a few thousand people, myself included, who are fairly flabbergasted that I'm standing here and talking to you about this topic today. Not the least of which is because for 22 years, I was a maternity doctor delivering life into this world. Then, in 2015, the Supreme Court of Canada struck down the prohibition of assisted dying, and our government legislated this new field of healthcare. And I became one of the first physicians in the country to offer assisted dying to people who met all of the required criteria. How has this played out in my life? Well, my husband likes to joke he now sleeps with one eye open. But seriously, I have met the most extraordinary people. I knew from the first moment I met him that Ed was an eccentric man. 68 years old, and he was proud to say he had never held a job and had lived the life of a free spirit. Like over 65% of the people I work with, Ed had a cancer that had progressed to the point that he would be dying soon. It was impossible for him to even venture outside, and life confined within four walls was simply not a life for Ed. When I arrived on the day of his scheduled death, we chatted for a while first, and after a few minutes he excused himself to go to the restroom. I was shocked when 2 minutes later he returned wearing a full clown suit. Tie-dyed pants, a t-shirt, a colorful clown wig, and a red nose. Despite all our previous interactions, I'd never realized Ed was an amateur clown. I asked him why he'd chosen to wear the clown suit on that day, and he told me he wanted to go out laughing. Are you sure you're ready? Oh yes, I'm certainly ready. He was lying there, all colorfully laid out and staring straight up at the ceiling. Not nervous, not sad, but not smiling. I was standing to his left, close to the bed, with my medications laid out beside me on the bedside table. And often at this time, as I begin giving the medicine, I'll guide my patients to a cherished memory. But on that day, I leaned over instead and asked, Ed, why don't cannibals ever eat clowns? Well, he turned his face towards mine with a really big smile, and he answered, because they always taste a little funny. And we were nose to nose, and both of us grinning from ear to ear. And I heard him chuckle as he turned his head back to a comfortable position. And then he closed his eyes and fell asleep. And some moments really stick with you. Ed's story really encompasses so much of what I want people to understand about assisted dying, that it's an individual's choice, that what's most meaningful to the person is what becomes most important, that levity and humor can be acceptable, and that an assisted death in ways big or small almost always reflects a person's life and how they chose to live it. You might be surprised to discover assisted dying isn't new. When I began this work in 2016, there were already 6 countries outside of Canada where some form of assisted dying was permitted, and 5 states within the U.S. Today, there are 14 countries where assisted dying is legal, and 11 regions within the U.S. alone. Why do you think there's been so much recent change? I want to tell you about Harvey. By the time I met him, Harvey was 74 years old and dying of end-stage liver failure. I met with Harvey and his wife at his home on several occasions. There is, of course, a rigorous process to be followed, a number of eligibility criteria to be met, and procedural safeguards to be satisfied. You can't just call up and ask for an assisted death. Harvey was terminally ill, but still very capable of speaking for himself, and within a matter of days, I was able to confirm that he was eligible for an assisted death. And then something remarkable happened. Harvey immediately stopped worrying about how he would die and spent the rest of his days focused on how he wanted to live. Harvey planned and attended a weekend open house in his home for neighbors and friends to come say goodbye. He snuck a final sip of beer, and eventually we choreographed his death together. He told me who he wanted to be there and where he wanted to be, in his own bed, in his own home, and I quickly came to understand that Harvey wanted to die just as he had lived, self-made and in control.
A&W stackers are here. Single, double, or triple pack. And starting at just $3.99, you can get a whole stack.
That'll make you die.
When I arrived at Harvey's home on the day of his death, we first spoke privately so I could confirm he hadn't changed his mind and to get his final consent. And then I prepared his family for what they could expect. When we finally gathered together in his bedroom, there was only Harvey on his bed, His 2 grown children close by, both of them holding him or touching him in some way. And his wife, sitting on a chair to his right, pulled up close and leaning in. I was holding his left arm, ready to administer the medications, and Harvey was planning to die exactly as he had planned, being held by his family and gazing into the eyes of his wife. His wife of 52 years. Can you imagine? They connected there, forehead to forehead, whispering to each other as I began giving the medicine. She held his face in her hands and stroked his head and told him it was okay, that she loved him, that she would miss him, but that she'd be all right. She whispered inaudible words, and I saw him smile, and the intimacy of that moment was so absorbing. I'll admit I struggled to focus on what I was doing. She told him to let go and that she was there for him. And as was true on most nights of his life, hers were the last words he heard as he fell asleep. Another one of those images etched in my mind forever. Like I said, some things really stick with you. It's not always easy to explain my work. Can you imagine me at a cocktail party? Someone inevitably asks, "So what do you do?" I think the honest answer is, I help people. Death and dying are an inevitable part of life, but we've been removed from much of the process. Most of us are poorly informed about what we might expect, and often fearful of even asking to talk about it. But I urge you to take a closer look, because assisted dying is humane, compassionate care. It will certainly change the way we consider our options at the end of life. But take a closer look and you'll discover something more. That assisted dying is less about death than it is about how we wish to live. Thank you.
I'm crying.
It was really good.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure I had rights to play that for a crowd, so I emailed her and she said, "Go for it. Thank you for showing confidence in me." So these are the things I can email to you.
Okay.
So these are just some useful resources. Bridge C14, Dying with Dignity Canada, MAiD Family Support.
Okay, and Terry will send all those links to me, and I'll send them out to everybody.
And then CAMAP Canada. CAMAP stands for Canadian Association of MAiD Assessors and Providers. And Dr. Green was the originator of this. It's a email thing that the whole country is involved in, or all of the assessors and providers in Canada, but there's also a public part too. And that's my talk.
Okay, and would like to take some questions and answers? Questions?
Yes, sure.
Great. Yes, Patty.
Dr. Miller, can you talk a little bit about the drugs that are used? Because I was talking with somebody the other day who is very much of the opinion that the drugs in the process was painful and long and like round. And I thought,
That
I don't
can't
see
be
how
right.
that could be. So how could you, like...
There is some bad press about MAiD. There was a ICU doctor who talked about his mother, and then he supposedly researched a MAiD death, and he claimed that people were drowning. It's not possible, because the first drug is midazolam, which is everybody's probably had it to have their colonoscopy, and it basically just relaxes you. The second drug is lidocaine, which is just to freeze your pain. The third drug is propofol, which is basically a general anesthetic.
It's Michael Jackson drug.
Yep, Michael Jackson drug. And then the last two are just assurances. The whole process takes 10 to 12 minutes. There is the other option of oral MAiD. I've never done it, but some people prefer to do oral MAiD because they're in control. They have to swallow it themselves. They have to drink it themselves. But they also have to have an IV because there are failures, and they have to have signed a waiver, which means that if they haven't died within X amount of time, the provider, who has to be present, can then give IV MAiD.
Terry, if I'm computer illiterate, right?
Yeah.
So if I was interested, do I go through you or do I go to the hub and get you to direct me to the right people? Or I could not do a thing on the computer to get any information?
Probably.
Yeah, I can print it out for you for sure. Yeah.
You're welcome to contact me. The home and community care nurses are great. They do most of the paperwork for people who are not computer literate.
I know an awful lot of seniors do not use the computer.
For sure. Yeah. They talk about different ways of accessing MAiD, either directly speaking to a doctor. I prefer that the application be made to the MAiD Coordination Centre in Kelowna, and it's just an IH thing, and then they organize everything from there on in, including the nursing staff who will tend to the patient and the two assessors, the prescriber and the assessor. It's just easier and it's formalized, and then everything's documented.
And so how long does it take from the start of an application to say you want MAiD? Like, does a doctor first of all tell you, you're near end of life, like MAiD could be an opportunity for you? And then what is the process?
It seems that more commonly it is being raised by hospital staff or doctors. People know about it and they seek it out, or they know somebody who's had it and thought it was a reasonable thing to look into. How long does it take? Well, the MAiD Coordination Centre are, as anywhere, they only work Monday to Friday.
Right.
But they're fast.
But they're fast, yeah.
Okay.
It then comes down to the availability of the assessor and the provider, which depends on where you are. I'm traveling to Williams Lake and Horsefly and Lone Butte, and so there's really not many providers in all of northwestern IH.
Right. Wow. And so, what's the assessor is different from the provider?
Yeah.
They have to be different, so that's two different doctors?
They have to be different and independent.
So can the assessor be your home doctor, or does it have to be a professional?
If your home doctor will do it, then yes. But everybody can say, no, I don't want to do it. But your family doctor has an obligation to refer you on.
Right.
You got a question way at the back there, I think.
Sorry?
Marily keeps putting her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Heidi.
Hi. I just want to maybe speak on eligibility. I know terminal diagnosis, but a couple of years ago I heard that they were maybe opening up to mental health issues or addictions as well. Is that something that...
It hasn't gone before the legislature yet. They're predicting spring of 2027.
Okay. Right.
And as I said, they are also addressing advanced consent.
So if you... just to go about advanced consent, just so I can clarify, does advanced consent, is that for somebody, say, who's... has Alzheimer's, know they have Alzheimer's, but they
still have to be capable at the time of doing the application.
Kim, sorry, Terry, it's Alzheimer's, not old timers.
Oh. I said Alzheimer's. So if you have Alzheimer's, you can't say, when I get to this situation, I want to have MAiD.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
But as with anything, there's often multiple diagnoses involved.
Right.
I mean, if you're at risk for Alzheimer's, but you also have metastatic prostate cancer, you can qualify based on the prostate cancer.
Okay. I think.
Sorry.
Do you have to qualify medically before you can have the form filled out, or can you not have it filled out as part of your end-of-life plan in case you get hit by a car and no longer mentally capable of making decisions?
Yeah, you wouldn't qualify.
Yeah.
So you couldn't just have the form made out.
So you have to have
for when you needed it.
that's the point of the advanced consent, but we don't yet have it. Like I say, unless you move to Quebec.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to be capable of knowing what you're consenting to currently.
Yeah.
And Terry and I have been involved with cases where people have told he and I throughout their life that this is what they wanted. But they've waited too long and they have not been deemed to be capable. And it's tough because both he and I know that they don't want to be in the situation they're in, but they've got more advanced dementia. And they have to be capable. And if they can't be capable, you can't go
Do you
through
think
it.
it'll ever come?
That's what Terry's talking about.
Except if you are track 1, I will invariably tell people that they are at risk of losing capacity.
Right.
And then I will do a waiver of final consent, which give, as I said, 6 months at a time, and we can keep advancing that. If they're doing well in 6 months, then we just move it out 6 months.
Yeah.
So how do you determine who is capable and who isn't? Let's say you wake up and it's from some accident, right? Whatever. How do you decipher who's capable?
Before or after having being qualified for MAiD?
After.
After qualifying for MAiD?
No, before MAiD, I should say, but after incident where you.
Yeah, that's the point of advanced consent, and it's not yet legal.
They have to look you in the eye and say, and you can tell when someone, most of the time you can be pretty sure someone knows what they're agreeing to. And you can be sure when they're absolutely not.
And you interview them, and you interview the family, and you talk to the family doctor.
So that's how you decipher it.
Yeah. And some people have fluctuating levels of capability, too, and you just have to catch them on a day when they're capable.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can squeeze it through.
Yeah.
So if someone is concerned about that, losing mental capacity through dementia, is this a process they should start now? Like, should they start filling out these forms and then look because you said they can't give advance consent, but you might be able
Well, they still have to have a term, like a life-restricting illness.
Okay. So.
Their death doesn't have to be naturally foreseeable, but to get an advance consent, it does. So if you don't have metastatic cancer or restrictive lung disease, which is end stage, or terminal kidney failure, you're probably not going to qualify as a track 1, which means that you won't get a waiver.
Okay, because the issue I'm thinking about is that the person's physical health is deteriorating, but they're at pretty high risk of not being able to give consent. So there isn't.
Until such time as they develop a life-limiting illness.
Okay, I read a bunch of stuff on the interweb about the advance of this, and I didn't get that impression exactly.
Sorry, what was your?
Like on the, it seemed like you could give some kind of an advanced.
Well, again, it depends on other issues. Like if you have COPD, which is moderate to severe, and you have type 2 diabetes, then you can pile these things together, and then you can also add in frailty if you're losing the ability to mobilize or do your activities.
That's exactly the issue. Lack of mobility combined with.
Yeah. So at the point they have a reasonably foreseeable death as a result of those things, then they can do a waiver.
Okay. All right, further discussion is required. We'll have to talk to it.
Yeah, for now.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, is on that same subject, at what point does it become advanced? Like, when people are developing Alzheimer's, there's a loss of memory.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's taken some cognitive testing.
Yeah.
And she's not really bad, but she's started to, she passed.
Right.
But she could see signs, which is why she was being tested.
Yeah.
So can she do a 6-month thing in case it develops, or does she have to wait until she's deeper?
Based on the fact that she has potential dementia, she's not yet, doesn't yet qualify legally.
So you have to be actually diagnosed with dementia?
No, because if you're diagnosed with dementia, then you're not able to give, you don't have capacity.
So at what point could she apply?
Not till 2027, when they hopefully will legalize advanced consent.
Right.
I have a very healthy sister who's 10 years older than me, and she has advanced dementia. She would have been ideal, but the law doesn't allow it.
And that was my aunt when she had that heart problem. She already had some short-term dementia problems, and she couldn't consent properly. So, because she would have loved to have, I mean, she used to say, I'm not contributing, I don't want to use up healthcare dollars that can go to someone younger or healthier. She was a true socialist, but couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could a medical executor not speak on that behalf, though, if they have one?
For MAiD?
Yeah.
No, the requester has to have capability to sign the forms.
So what if they put in the request and they've signed it because of the 6 months, and then they did get diagnosed with dementia or whichever, would that play in effect? Or would it
In order to qualify for a waiver, they have to have a present life limiting condition. Yes. Good morning.
I lost a loved one in October through MAiD.
Okay.
And ever since that happened, I've been struggling, not knowing, like, this is very informative.
Good.
When you're left with the outcome of watching your loved one get my injections and everything, you know, and there's nothing going in your head as to why, and
that's where it comes back to this whole process is really important, I think, because families need to talk about this as families, and so that everybody's on board. Of the provisions that I've been involved in, most of them are extremely pleasant because everybody is on side.
Yes,
I've had
like I said, when this first happened, when I first got wind of it in October, and she chose the 20th, October 20th, to have this done. You know, I was just in the dark. I never heard of MAiD before, and the only thing I can relate that to is Sue Rodriguez.
Yeah.
That was the first case, you know, of euthanasia.
Yeah.
And since October to now, it's been a struggle. You know, not knowing the answers, not knowing why. But coming to this and seeing the video of why she did it, why she chose that, you know, it brings more sense as to your loved one's choice. So I thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That lifts a lot from my heart. You know, and
I consider MAiD part of palliative care. It's not really, but some people do think of it as such. And if you look at the statistics from 2023, Canada-wide, something like 19% of MAiD providers were palliative care physicians.
Thank you. Say you have kidney disease.
Yes.
How far does it have to go before you can go access MAiD?
Well, if again, there's so many different variables, but I recently had a case where the client had a GFR of 16, which is sort of end-stage kidney failure, and she refused to have dialysis, and that comes back to that in the requestor's mind if it's acceptable or not, and she didn't accept dialysis. She could have kept living for 3 years, but she would have been basically spending all of her time in the dialysis ward.
Yeah.
So it depends on how bad your kidney failure, or whoever you're talking about, how bad their kidney failure is.
In that circumstance, would you be eligible then?
Well, the case I had was, yes.
Well, like if you refuse dialysis, you'd be.
It was not acceptable to her, so it's patient-centered treatment, and that means that we can't force dialysis on her.
That would be cruel if she doesn't want it.
Yeah,
cruel.
Yeah.
So she can turn around and say, "I want MAiD instead of dialysis."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's answered the question.
I mean, she had other things too, so it helped build the case. But the forms I fill in, they go to Kelowna, they go to Victoria. Victoria does a whole dot by dot, cross the T's, dot the I's, and make sure the times and dates are correct. Then they go to Ottawa, and they're reviewed by Health Canada. The statistics that are available on the net right now are from 2023. And in 2023, there were 15,600 MAiD deaths in Canada.
It just seems so much more humane, as getting older. I'm 78. Most of my friends are in that age group. Some are older.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to spend our last days in a hospital being kept alive just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
If we don't have a life to live, we just want to choose when we can go.
I think that's the biggest issue, is choice.
Yeah, and that business about having to, if we have to wait till 2007, most of us will be able to make that, but it just seems like that's the way it should be. I guess there's a lot of hangover of thinking that it's cruel in some way, or that people are trying to get rid of us or something. But I think that TED Talk, that was, really eye-opener. I think,
Yeah, and if you go look at TED Talks about MAiD, you'll find the opposite side. Like I was saying about this fellow that said that everybody was drowning when they were getting
right.
MAiD.
Yeah, there's lots of misinformation out there.
It seems that way for everything, like statins. Take them, don't take them, they'll kill you, they'll save you.
When Kim asked me to do this, my wife and I were in the sauna up here, and this young fella started going on about all sorts of misinformation when we were, the way of the world. But I've been involved with quite a few MAiD deaths over the years. I originally signed up to do it when it first came out, but then I found out, like what Terry's doing, they were typical to Interior Health, they would want me to go all over the Interior Health West, like where we are, to provide this when we were short-staffed here, and I wasn't willing to do that. So I said no.
Right.
Thankfully, Terry filled the gap, because as you heard, and I think most of you were able to hear him, he's one of the few docs doing this in this area. So it's,
Provisions. You can get the other part, the assessment part, virtually.
Yeah.
So a lot of those are done from Kamloops or Penticton or.
Yeah, but if you're suffering and wanting to have control over your life, having someone available to do it for you is quite important.
I refuse to do the prescriber assessment virtually. I want to
see them.
Look them in the eye.
Yeah.
And so the process here, like in Lillooet, would someone who's thinking about it, but the doctor hasn't brought it up, can they go see their family doctor
and ask
for that? And then would they be referred to you?
I would, like I said, I prefer that it be through the MAiD Coordination Centre.
Right.
And hopefully the number, I think the number's there.
But that's what people here should do. If their doctor hasn't mentioned it to them and they've been thinking about it, they can bring it up with their family doctor.
Absolutely.
And their family doctor will then give them all the information they need to...
Or refer them on to somebody who can.
Or refer them on.
And he's obligated to do that.
To refer them on? Yeah, it's the same as women's rights and...
Yeah.
So if you're in a clinic where possibly like religious, the doctor has some kind of religious reasons against it, what is the process then?
They are obliged to refer on to somebody who is able to have the discussion. It's just like I pick up all of my medications for MAiD here in Lillooet.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the pharmacies will do it and the other one won't.
Okay.
The place in Kelowna, you said?
MAiD Coordination Centre, yeah.
Do they send out information to doctors throughout BC, throughout Canada, or like informing them about the options?
It's available. They probably have to go look for it, though.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I ask both of you, do you have any fear that this will be abused?
Oh, it already is. Not to a great extent, but
like by the medical community or by people's families or certain groups that that's going to be offered?
There was a case in Nova Scotia, I believe it was a Armed Forces veteran, and I don't know what the bottom line of thinking was, but they still had a long way to live, and they were told to go talk about MAiD.
I heard about that.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, I think there's a portion of Canadians that are concerned about people in poverty or people with, that are neurodiverse or have some really, serious, like my mother was a quadriplegic for years.
Yeah.
But I say, don't you judge the quality of somebody else's life.
But Patty, one of the things that Terry said was that to apply for MAiD, you can't be coerced. So you'd have to, if you had a family that was trying to coerce you into going for MAiD, you'd have to convince the physician that you weren't being coerced, right? I've had patients that you can tell they're on the fence. They're not 100%. They're just not willing to do it, and you never try to pressure them with it at all. And everything potentially can be abused. But it's all about degrees. So the degree of people that actually benefit from this far and away outweighs the few that perhaps are being coerced or whatever. And
Okay, we have two more questions and that's all because we're just about up. So Fred.
What is the purpose of having an advance directive if you have to have terminal disease before you can make a decision on your own? And what's the purpose of having an advance directive then?
Because then it allows your medical advisor, what's it called? Yeah.
Decision maker.
Decision maker, yes. Help make those decisions for you. If you.
So if you do have someone that I have difficulty understanding.
No, Fred, I think what's happening is you're combining the ability to have MAiD with the ability to decide that you don't want further treatment, and they are kind of a bit exclusive. So you can apply for MAiD, but if you're not able to give consent for MAiD, you may not get it. But you can early on say in your advance directive, I don't want this level of care, and you can also tell the person who's making decisions for you, who you've picked, in the event. So with my aunt, for example, when she got to the point where she developed pneumonia in a long-term care place, I was very comfortable making the decision. I didn't like it, but I was very comfortable making the decision to say comfort measures only. Don't try to extend her life. Don't give her antibiotics. She's 99 years old. She does not want to continue to live. She couldn't go for MAiD, but her life was, we didn't try to keep her going, extend her life past an illness. Because we're all going to die of something, right? Most of us are going to die of something more than just falling asleep at night. So, yeah, you can't get MAiD for certain things, but having an advance directive guarantees, as best as possible, you have a choice in how your end happens. Accepting MAiD.
Hi. Me again. So I just want to, it's not a question, maybe more speaking on the spirituality side of it, and you possibly run into people who are afraid that their spirits won't be accepted into the heavens. A lot of First Nations people, we believe that, like, if you have a successful suicide, that the spirit remains in limbo. So I've had people come to me and say, well, it seems wrong. It seems wrong because of that fact.
Yeah.
So I guess then you would just refer them on to mental health services to help them with that, or it's just something that maybe you want to consider.
For sure, it's a tough one. Those statistics from 2023 that I was talking about, of those 15,600 MAiD deaths in Canada, only 80 were Indigenous. And that includes Métis and Inuit.
That's probably why.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming. And if there's any other topics that you would like clarity on, can you leave a little note on the sign-in sheet?